The song Live and Learn made headlines right before Sonic Movie 3, and how did that battle over recordings and compositions turn out? Today's video is just a casual simplification for Sonic fans. It's not legal advice or expertise. Because this topic involves Sega's reputation, this video's purpose is to establish why I will continue being a fan of Sonic and buy the games now that I've considered the cause and effect of the different things that happened with the song Live and Learn. Which brings us to a most important title card. Sonic Adventure 2, The Trial, is the name of the demo disc for SA2. That's where the song Live and Learn first began, without Jonny. As you will see, the showdown with this song factors in the aspects of both contracts and copyrights. Those two things are not the same. Sometimes a contract can be the much more important aspect, in which case you do not even go down the road of copyright mechanics. This doesn't always mean that copyright stuff completely disappears, and that's how Sonic Movie 3 got the song Live and Learn, by going through Jonny's business email, on account of the composition, but we'll get to that. There are some legal rules in place to protect a company like Sega, Traveler's Tales, or whoever. These protections are justified because it's unfair if someone who claims to be a co-owner of a copyright waits quietly for years, does nothing while the rightful owner invests time, effort, and money to develop and sell the work, and then tries to swoop in and take a share of the profits. This is not talking about Jonny here. That's just the purpose of the law structure. Protections like this exist to defend a company against this kind of maneuver. However, those rules don't just up and dissolve if Jonny says that he never knew Live and Learn was being used in all those projects until now. The conflict so far involves mostly contractual mechanics, more so than copyright nuances, the IP itself. But copyright IP is still legit and real, and continues to be a prominent component in Jonny Gioeli's music operations to this day. For example, after Sonic Movie 3, Fortnite rolls up to Sega to ask about using Live and Learn, and Sega instructs them to go to Jonny. Same setup as Sonic Movie 3. That's on account of the composition, I figure. In which case, Fortnite wants to use not just the recording, but reimagine the composition, like the movie did. That's a possibility. I don't want to hear people say in the comments that I'm not allowed to talk about this if I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a fan like you who wants to clearly understand whether the musicians under Sega are being treated with respect. And from what I can tell, yes, they are, definitely. You have to start asking yourself these questions as early as college, even in high school. Mark Zuckerberg and the other guys developed Facebook in their college dorm. The ownership complications eventually exploded in a major way in the Aaron Sorkin movie. So when entering a creative collaboration at any age, it's responsible to start to consider the obligatory mechanics that come into play. So as we dive in now to the Live and Learn situation, you will see contracts at the very earliest moments of this arc, which kind of seals the fate up front for a lot of what happened 20 years afterward. This is why the judge dismissed the recording aspect with prejudice, which means you totally lose. You can never even try again for the recording. In 2001, for Sonic Adventure 2, for the song Live and Learn, Jonny was contracted for contributing lyrics only. So that would mean just the words, as even separate from singing the vocals with a melody. That was the contract, while, in actuality, Jonny's involvement grew beyond that. He sang the vocals, and ultimately, it is said that he produced the sound recording for the song. It was submitted for the game. So you see, the problem here is that, on paper, the only thing Jonny did was provide lyrics, not songwriting, recording, producing, or even vocal services. If Jun Sonoy was contracted to do each of these things, that's the distinction which will seal the fate of this case 20 years down the line. Jump forward. The year is 2024, Sonic Movie 3 is incoming, and it's going to have Live and Learn. And as the movie approaches, Jonny learns that the song has been used in 20 or more games over the past 20 years, and he's looking for cash now, after the fact. Total of $1 million all told. Nice clean $1 million bill. That's why it's called the $1 million Day. So here comes the contracts versus copyright stuff. Back around the time that they made the game Sonic Adventure 2, they also licensed the song Live and Learn to appear in an online music downloading service. And I'm just going to call it iTunes, since the real name will be far too distracting. Nightbane. So in this iTunes agreement, every time someone pays to download Live and Learn on iTunes, Jonny gets a cut. So you're probably thinking, that must mean Sega is acknowledging Jonny's partial ownership stake in the recording, right? Nope. Get ready for this, guys. The iTunes agreement says, Sega has all right, title, or interest to and from the sound recordings. However, Sega is willing to pay a premium to Jonny for his contribution to the sound recording, which, as we know, was the lyrics, officially. So that establishes that Sega owns the recording completely, not necessarily the composition, but the specific recording. Sega chose to pay Jonny for iTunes downloads, but that wouldn't mean Jonny needs to get a cut if Live and Learn is used in a Sonic racing game, or if it appears in Smash Bros., which is what happened on Wii, then Wii U, then Switch 1. Sega paid Jonny a cut of the iTunes downloads voluntarily to do Jonny a solid. Maybe they didn't have to pay him anything since they owned the recording in question and had paid a fee for SA2, but they chose to give Jonny a cut. And you guys wonder why we can't have nice things at times? A cynical theory could suggest that Sega only drafted the iTunes agreement in the first place so that they could clearly define Sega's ownership of the recording on paper. Even if that were the motivation, you don't hold that against Sega on some ethical grounds, and Jonny signed the contract. It's open and shut. That's just basic responsible business, not devious or sketchy, especially if it clears up some of the ambiguity that was pending after the base game's development. Sega doesn't appear to own the composition. Meanwhile, Nintendo went ahead and did new versions of David Wise compositions in the Mario movie. Donkey Kong Country's first level music is heard outside the DK door. It was awesome. If Jonny disagreed with the 2001 terms of that iTunes contract, there's a statute of limitations. He had 3 years to take action, which ended in 2004. So the $1 million Day was the 20-year anniversary of Jonny being late. In 2024, in the weeks leading up to Sonic Movie 3. That year, Jonny filled out a form to establish ownership of the recording, and the statute of limitations is why it was rejected. If I was Jonny, wouldn't I want to sort out the recording ownership first and then proceed with the comprehensive $1 million? Does Jonny even know if Sega was paid a fee proper for Live and Learn to go and Smash? Could it have been part of a quid pro quo that helped make Sonic Lost World become a Wii U exclusive? That is some Jun Sonoy guitar bliss right there. We're going to talk about Sonoy another time. He is a class act, and it will be splendid. His guitar rock on the Dreamcast GameCube era is so extraordinarily important that it's one of those moments where I'm like, yep, I'm definitely going to have to do a music theory video about this in the next few years. But a lot of this so far only concludes the topic specifically of the recording. The composition is a different aspect. For Sonic Movie 3, recall that Paramount's use of Live and Learn had to go through Jonny. Why? Perhaps it's because Sonic Movie 3 doesn't use the Sega-owned recording. It has a new version assembled by the guy who did the movie's score, taking the composition to produce a new arrangement, a new .wav file to export as in Logic Pro or whatever other software. In the movie, Maria plays the acoustic guitar riff at the beginning, and even the climax battle version is itself a newly created instrument recording. So if you're looking for current clarity for Jonny's stake in Live and Learn moving forward, from what I can tell, it's pretty much set up like Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift's record label owns the recordings of her song for each of the albums, but Taylor Swift continues to own the composition itself. That's why Taylor was able to circumvent her record label to re-record entire full albums of music and then re-release those new ones on Spotify to get paid directly. If the $1 Million Days timing was intended for Sonic fans to see it just before the movie, well, as a Sonic fan, I don't understand what the point of it was, and I don't feel as good about it. If this was going to involve spelling out a bill for decades of games, maybe the recording ownership could have been sorted out in private, to start, without Jonny needing to swoop in on Hollywood's Eve to say that because he's not a Sonic fan, he had no idea his song was used in dozens of major games throughout the generations. Did you know that the band name Crush 40 was sort of a midlife crisis about the devastation of turning 40? Jonny didn't want to turn 40, so naming the band that was a way of saying, Crush 40. So the kernel that began it all was the energy that, when the inevitable approaches, disregard it, pretend like it's not there. The dad vibes twist under our noses all along. Instead of just living life and learning, Jonny's here for some adulting. And if anyone watching this feels uneasy about turning 30 or 40, I could go into that another time in a separate video, if people want. Meanwhile, with the Crush 40 band, Live and Learn the song was included in Sonic Generations. Jun Senoue did music on that game, which included a new Balloon Park remix or two. So if Jun and Jonny don't communicate much outside work emails and occasional vacations, why does that become a $1 million tab for Sega to pick up? If I, myself, personally, was making music in Sonic's game series and there was a chance of a $15 million payday, I wouldn't do it. Certainly if it risked severing ties with the iconic life force that Sonic is and will continue to be. Immortality of art, legitimately. And it just so happens that no one gets to hear Crush 40 in Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. At the end of the day, I admire Grant Kirkhope a great deal, but these Kirkhope types don't know how to grab the W when their immortal creations reach Hollywood. Some people wait a lifetime for a moment like this, and then it never happens. So since it did happen to Jonny, he ought to enjoy it by taking the W. Sega made Jonny. When I think of the Sonic Heroes main theme, if you asked me, I would have regarded that as by Crush 40. Am I correct in that perception? Is it a two-man band of mutual creativity? Or is it actually Jun Senoue as the company employee and Jonny as the consultant for hire? I'm not prying. I'm just interested to know why this was so necessary to unveil right before the Jim Carrey trilogy moment. Jim Carrey, my favorite actor growing up. Nowadays, he only does Sonic movies now. That bears repeating. That's why you should not misuse Jim Carrey in Sonic Movie 2. And that's going to bring us to what happens next as we look forward into the future, since this situation is not completely done, even if the battle over the recording is all set. Jun Senoue will continue with Sega and Crossworlds and everything. If Fortnite or Minecraft wants to use Live and Learn, they might reach out to Sega, who might tell them to reach out to Jonny. Perhaps there will come a day where I talk about the composition history of this song. It began on the demo disc of Sonic Adventure 2, The Trial. Jun Senoue initially composed Live and Learn's instrumental for a quick looping version for the demo's menus. After the demo, Senoue expanded it into a full-song instrumental. If Jonny was then given those raw recordings, and given the flexibility to alter the song structure with the ordering of sections and repetitions, then that would be part of the finished product along with Jonny's vocal melody, which would contribute to the composition role. Standard procedure within Crush 40 has Senoue compose and record all the guitars and drums and whatnot, then send the instrumental to Jonny overseas after the fact to create the lyrics and vocal melody separately. It's just that if I was Jonny, speaking for myself, and $30 million was at stake, I would still keep it private where possible. I would have a Zoom call with Senoue to plot how we might posture Crush 40 for a surprise appearance in Sonic Frontiers 2. Maybe a post-credits supersonic fight? Mid-credits even? There is a silver lining to Sega retaining this recording. Possibly. Because think about it. Hypothetically, if Jonny had obtained the recording rights back within the statute of limitations shortly after they made Sonic Adventure 2, who knows whether that would have affected the number of times the song went on to appear in this or that game, Sega or otherwise. Remember, you have to pay fees if you want to use Sonic 1 and 2 music, which is why Sonic Spinball had music yanked at the last second. And even Sonic Pocket Adventure used a ton of Sonic 3 compositions, even though the levels are mostly inspired by Sonic 2. Metropolis level has Desert Palace. It's hilarious. So as we wind down here, nothing but love to Jonny. I've been a fan for so long, will continue to be one, and the purpose of this treatise video today was not to get a response out of him. This is just me as a big fan of Sonic music who wants to ensure, naturally, that all the musicians involved are being treated with respect. I'm going to continue buying Sega games. I just wanted to ensure that I could do so with a clear conscience. And it turns out, yes, I can. Here on this terrestrial internet radio station where we play all the Jun Senoi hits, here at 91.6 WAYZ, the Alex Yard Zone, terrestrial internet satellite radio. If you see us running, try to keep up. Is Shadow's music different from Sonic's? Almost definitely. Look, I know that video I made, the music theory of Shadow music, went a little bit overboard with the memes, but being a very city-based, real-world vibe during the year of Shadow with the motorcycle in real life, the time was right. It was a time and place, the year of Shadow, when the $1 Million Day happened in the Southern California Judicial District. Of the different judicial zones in California, Sonic Adventure 2 was developed in San Francisco, where City Escape is, in the Northern Zone District. The Million in the South was in time moved to the Central District instead, where it was dismissed with prejudice. Fall back. We can check in on the post-Fortnite landscape when that day comes. Not as a drama festival, but only to educate everyone on composition rights and recording contracts, to prevent these kerfuffles in the future. My parting question is the live and learn composition rights set up just like Taylor Swift? With Michael Jackson's example of the song Stranger in Moscow, you look up the composer credit and you only see the name of Michael himself, even though it contained Brad Buxer's chord progressions that he made for Sonic 3. Even the ba-na-na, it's the same chord motion and section B even, all completely uncredited. The composer on file is only Michael. It's so complicated. And we all recognize that. So let's regroup next time. Good night, everybody.